Tonight's show is brought to you by History, because it's fun, Vendetti Optics, and you, our listeners. One national park, one World Heritage Site, one 226-year-old haunted house, one state park, 3 days, 2 nights, 850 miles, and an alligator in a cypress tree. What is up, all of you wayward souls, and welcome back to the Wayward Stories podcast. Wayward Stories is the podcast where we tell the tales of our adventures and our wanderings and our wonderings. How are you guys doing? It's been a minute again. You know, it is what it is. Hey, listen, just like PSA for all of you out there, if you ever start feeling overwhelmed, if you ever start struggling with motivation, feeling depressed, make sure and reach out to your support group, to your people. And if you don't have people, something I am all too familiar with, you got to reach down deep inside and remember what you do, all the things that you do for. For me, I have a wonderful little child, and that's probably the one thing that's keeping me anchored through going through school, going to work every day, trying to do all the things all the time, and attempting to make something out of my life this late in life. And, you know, that can get stressful and overwhelming. Hence, you're getting podcasts sometimes about once every 5 weeks now. Anyway, it's tough. And I just wanted to say, any of you guys out there that feel any of those challenges as you're going through life, understand this. We live in a weird world right now. Now, I'm a historian. I will not say things are worse than they've ever been, because that is like one of the most ignorant statements you could possibly make. Ask any historian, they'll roll their eyes so hard that you can hear it and then say, pick a year and let me burst your bubble. No, things are better than they've really ever been in so many ways. We got it pretty good, but it is a different landscape, a different world. And a lot of people struggle with that. Like, we don't know how to be in today's world because today's world is new to us. It's not what we had been sold for the last 60, 70, 80 years. And then they were still lying to us about it up until like 10 years ago. And so many of us, especially that were born in, say, the 70s, 80s, even the 90s, we were really laboring under a false pretense that hard work and dedication would get you somewhere in America. That hasn't been true in a long, long time. Okay. That's just not how it works anymore. What it gets you is the same paycheck as the guy next to you and you doing half of his work because they need him there. He's a warm body, but you showed that you were a hard worker and dedicated. And all that really gets you anymore is more work for the same pay. Welcome to America. So things are different now. And if you ever struggle with any of those thoughts, just remember you're not alone. Sometimes there's a lot of validation and justification and just a little bit of empowerment in knowing, you know what, it's not just me. I'm not the only one suffering through all this crap. So just remember that, reach out to your people, and if nothing else, reach out to me, mywaywardstory@gmail.com. I will happily talk to you if you need someone to talk to. Anyway, let's get into tonight's show after, you know what, almost forgot housekeeping, but I've been very good at keeping it short and sweet here lately. Please like and subscribe. Please rate and review. If you will leave us a review, we are always eternally grateful. They come so hard. They're so hard to come by, and we appreciate every single one. And I will shout you out if you, in fact, do leave us a review on Apple Podcast where I can read it. Because apparently I can't read the reviews on Spotify for some reason. I can't access that, and I don't know why. And I'm sure people are writing reviews because some people have told me they have. I just don't know what they say because I don't have a way to access it, and I'm not sure why that is. Go over to waywardstories.com if you just want to check out everything that's going on. Like right now, I'm working on a new set of articles, a new collaboration for this time, the city of Fort Smith. I guess it's called Discover Fort Smith or Explore Fort Smith. I think they're actually in the middle of a rebranding, and I'm not sure which it is. But after doing all those articles last year, I was like, I ain't doing it anymore for a while. I don't have the space for this. You know, I did the Crescent, Basin Park, did Northwest Arkansas, tourism, did a bunch of stuff. Super cool, super fun stuff. Finally, one came up for the city I actually live in, and it was Fort Smith for the history buff. And I was actually asked specifically by one of the departing members of the team that I do this for, is like, this is your thing. This is your city. Do you need to do this? And so I finally decided I would take it on. And I've been working on that over the last few weeks. It's almost done now, and I'm super excited about the photography for that and the writing for that. So that's something big that's been going on. That's going to be pretty cool when it's finally finished, and it's going to be a few dollars in my pocket, thank goodness, because I desperately need it. Other than that, got to shoot cannons. Last time we talked, I was about to be shooting cannons at Pea Ridge, and I actually was in the number 2 position on a cannon, which for all of you that don't know what that means, which included me up until the day that I did that, basically you're the charge handler. So you pick up and like load the 1.5 pound charge of black powder. Yeah. And when it goes off, you're within like 3 feet, I would say, to 4 feet maximum distance away from the muzzle, even though you're behind it. The heat that comes out of that thing, it's mind boggling. It was really trippy, but it was a lot of fun. I think we fired either 6 times or 8 times that day. I don't know. We did 3 demonstration times for sure, maybe 4. In each demonstration, there's 2 firings. So I got a pretty good amount of experience on that. And in that vein, coming up, not going to be firing a cannon, but I am going to be playing the part of a witness in a night court here. We do recreations of trials, actual trials that happened at Judge Parker's courtroom once a year, I guess. And this will be the first one I participate in. And I have taken on the ambitious project of having a small speaking part as a witness on the witness stand. And that means I do actually have to learn some lines. It's not a ton, but it's more than I'm probably capable of with this amount of mental space I have right now. But we're going to get it done because, well, that's fun. And it'll look good on a resume. Living history is kind of a big deal when you're trying to get jobs with the parks, any parks, state parks, national parks, doesn't really matter. Other than that, the last piece of housekeeping for the night, I guess you could call it housekeeping, is I want to say congratulations to Hugo. Do you guys remember when I told you a couple episodes ago, Mr. Hugo from Portugal had gotten in touch and we'd been having good conversations? Last I spoke with him, they had just had, he and his family and his wife had just had a new baby. So Hugo, congratulations. That is awesome. I want to see pictures one of these days, man. Make sure and send me a message whenever you hear this. Congratulations. And yeah, what else do you say when someone has a baby? Like Mazel Tov? No, that was when I was married into a Jewish family. Yeah, congratulations. Anyway, that was very, very cool, Hugo. That's a fun adventure indeed. Anyway, let's get on with tonight's show. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Tonight, we are going to talk about Nerd Trip 24. Could be Nerd Fest, even, if you like. But it is my daughter's birthday this month. It is coming up in just about a week now. But the way timing works out and such, I was able to get a day off work before she started school back, and we were able to get a long weekend, and I gave her the option. Last year, we went on a trip for her birthday, and we went to Branson. We've talked about that before, and it's a really cool theme park that's not that far from us, about 3 hours. So this year, she's been really wanting to go on bigger adventures. You guys remember the Seize the Moments episode. We just did it, right? That was a major stepping stone, okay? That was a major stepping stone to get to this moment, okay? It's kind of cool because it's starting to snowball the right way. We've crested the hill. This girl is ready to go explore now. And so she'd been talking about, I'm ready for a big adventure. Let's do a big adventure. So I was in my head, I was like, well, you know what? There's several places she might like, but I'm not trying to force being a nerd down her throat. I want her to have the option. I want her to have the option of everything. And I want her to get to experience everything so she can figure out what she really likes. So I made sure, I was like, listen, I came up with several options. I was like, we can go to Kansas City and go to the Steamboat Arabia Museum. And there's a haunted tour that we could take up there of a house because she's fallen in love with those. And there's a couple of national historic sites along the way. We could do that. And she's like, ooh, that sounds awesome. I said, or we could go back to Branson. We could go back to the theme park. That is an option. We can absolutely do that. Or we could go to St. Louis and go to Cahokia Mounds, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Native American mound site, that is of world importance in cultural and societal growth. Not growth, but, well, yeah, in a way, the progress of society and its significant, like globally, for the culture that is there. And she's into that kind of stuff. So we could go there and then we could find us a haunted something. We'd go to the Limp Mansion in St. Louis. Limp Mansion is famous for being haunted. They have a restaurant in it now. Go there. Or we could go to Poverty Point, which is another UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is super awesome place. Also, Vicksburg is not very far from it. Vicksburg has the Vicksburg National Military Park. Big Civil War battle goes down there. And they have the McRaven haunted home. They're the McRaven tour home that is purported to be extremely haunted. So I gave her all of those options. And much to my delight, she chose, well, one of the nerdy trips over the theme park. And I do love a theme park. I love Little Silver Dollar City up there. Maybe it's just nostalgia and childhood, whatever, but I love it up there. I'm always happy to go there. But it just excited my soul that this child is into learning. She's into museums. She loves these things. And I gave her the option full out. You can do any of these things, choose one. And she chose to go to Poverty Point and the McRaven tour home and to Vicksburg. And who knows, next year we'll probably do one of the other three or whatever. But so I was super excited to see this child actually taking interests in certain things and actually being able to facilitate those interests. So I'm excited by that. This is a birthday. I'm not a very rich man, but this is a birthday, and her birthdays are special to me, and I want to make them special for her. So I am willing to spend a little bit of money to make something sort of special as a poor man can make it, right? So I'm willing to spend $300 or $400. Like, I don't want to spend that much, but I will, if that's what it takes to, what's the right word here? Foster the environment for her interest and things she cares about. And it makes it special. You know, everyone loves a trip. She's come to love trips. And it just makes it really special. So I'm willing to do that. And that's a number. And see, this is different for everyone. Some people could not handle $400. And to me, I can't really, but I know that I can absorb it over the course of a year. I can handle it one time a year or one time every 6 months or whatever and manage to absorb that. Okay. So that's going to be different for everyone. If you go way back, maybe 2 years into our back catalog, you'll see things where there's an episode called You Don't Have to Be Rich to See the World. And I spend the whole episode talking about cheap ways to travel, so that you can get out. If you don't believe you can get out, there are ways to do it. And that's the thing is each situation is, well, it's exactly that. It is situational. Your situation is different than mine is. For you, $300 or $400 might be a drop in the bucket. You might be quite affluent and you're like, man, no, I'm going big. That's cool. Good for you. But some of you very possibly are like $300 or $400. There's no way. Well, scale it back. Don't think this is unattainable. Scale it back. Do smaller things, shorter distances. But I'm going to give you an example of how we traveled tonight. I'm going to give you the trip by the numbers and show you how I was able to make a little bit bigger of a trip happen and still keep it within a number that I was reasonably okay with by utilizing a lot of the rewards programs I've told you about. And I'm just going to give you the numbers. And so we're going to kind of start with that, and then we'll go into the trip by chronology. We're just going to go in the order we took the trip. But I'm excited to talk about this. I'm excited to be in the studio tonight talking to you guys. It's been 4 or 5 weeks, if not 6. I knew if I didn't do it tonight, it wouldn't get done, because this next week we have the county fair, and I'll be down there for 2 nights. I'll be in charge of search and rescue in the evenings, which we'll be doing but basically public relations and first aid and, keeping an eye on people and watching for child predators and all that stuff. Like, that's part of our gig, part of our public service we do. So that's 2 nights of this week. Still got homework and all the things. And I was like, you know what? Tonight is possible. I need to talk to my people. I need to put it out there. So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be getting started on this, and hope you guys enjoyed tonight's show. So let's get into Nerdfest 2024 by the numbers. We're going to start with the numbers. So let me throw these guys out here. All right. I spent $6 on ice total. And we're going to come back to several of these little points for a minute. I spent $6 total on ice for the ice chest to take drinks. And of course, that is because drinks that you take with you are far, far cheaper than buying them on the road. I can have a 3.5 cent bottle of water from Sam's Club, or I can buy one for $3.50 at Buc-ee's, so to speak. Gas, I spent $40. Could have been more. Again, we're going to come back to it. Rooms would have been $205. I paid $100. Food, over the normal amount of money I would spend in any weekend that I was either alone or with my child, was only $20. And I'm going to tell you how we did that as well. The most expensive part of the whole trip, truly, for a one ticket item, was the tour of the McRaven home, which came to $65 between the two of us. Poverty Point was $8. And then it was free to get into the national park. Well, I say it was free. That's another thing we're going to talk about. But it was free for me to get into the national park. And we spent $60 on souvenirs, which is probably more than we should have, because we can do souvenirs way cheaper. Like, we love the lapel pins and like the little tokens and, the tchotchkes. But for the total amount of $334, we saw one national park, one World Heritage Site, one 226-year-old haunted house, one state park, 3 days, 2 nights, 850 miles, and an alligator in a cypress tree, essentially. I feel like we came out really well, right at around $300. Now, on the point for point on this, the ice, follow my logic here, I paid $6 for 2 bags of ice. They were small bags of ice. They didn't have the large ones like I wanted, and that was to fill up my main cooler initially, which is a relatively small but big enough to carry an excess of waters and whatevers. And then a smaller one that sits in the front seat with me. So as we're driving, if someone needs a bottle of water, I reach into it. I don't have to stop the car and get out. $6 total. Why? Because when you get to the hotel where you're staying, they all have ice machines, and you can fill up your your coolers with ice ad nauseum until the trip is over and never pay another penny for ice. Okay. That's one of the hacks. The other is gas. Gas actually costs $75, or would have, except I used my rewards points from Casey's General Stores, which is a kind of middle America kind of thing. Not everyone has them, but most places in the country have rewards programs. And I utilize those stores regularly, purchasing gas for my work truck, and I use my rewards account when I do that. And that equates to essentially a free tank of gas about every 4 months, 4 to 5 months. So I was able to get away with gas for half the price, roughly half the price. Rooms utilized my rewards points from Best Western. So we were able to stay what would have been $205. We paid $100. Got basically one of the rooms free for one night, or the room free for one night. Food over the norm, $20. Why do I say food over norm? When you're traveling, do not consider food you eat in your budget, because do you just sit at home and not eat food and starve when you're not on a trip? No, you're eating. So if you go on a trip and you just buy a normal meal, like say your fast food, say you go to McDonald's every day for lunch at work. Well, if you just get McDonald's when you're on your road trip, why would you count that? You have to eat those meals at home anyway, right? So I only count like bigger meals. Like I always try to eat somewhere that's local flavor or whatever, just to get a feel for the local flavor, for lack of a better way of putting it. What do you have locally that's different, that's not a chain? Try to eat somewhere like that. So what I count is anything I spend over the norm of what I would spend if I was at home just to eat a meal. That's what I will count. That came away as $20, and that's pretty low for a trip. The way we did that is we ended up actually having pizza 2 nights in a row. You can never go wrong with pizza. And it's a road trip, and it's her birthday. It's a special trip. We can eat pizza if we want to. And the way that works is you buy a large pizza, you pay grand total of like $15 for it, almost anywhere you are, 15 or 18. You're not eating the whole pizza. I mean, this is me and my 9-year-old, turning 10-year-old, right? We ate half the pizza. Guess what was lunch the next day? The other half of that pizza. So we just spent $15 or $18 for 2 meals, which is not that much above the norm. And then we had pizza another night at one of the local places, which we're going to talk about later, but same scenario. You eat half the pizza and the rest of it's lunch tomorrow. And because I'm a kid at heart, and because my kid's a kid, we can eat pizza every meal of the day if we want to. It's a road trip for a birthday. We're allowed. We're allowed to do that, right? The Raven Home Tour was the most expensive part. Like I said, the McRaven Home. Poverty Point's actually just super cheap to get into. And it's a freaking World Heritage Site. It's actually, you know what? When I said that one state park, it's actually 2 state parks and 2 national parks, because Poverty Point is so special that not only is it a UNESCO World Heritage Site, it's also a U.S. national parks, like national monument site, and it's a Louisiana state park. So actually, it's 3 different things. So we had 2 state parks, 2 national parks, 1 World Heritage Site. That's pretty cool. And then, like I said, we spent too much on souvenirs, and I just have to take the shame on that one. Like, she saw a freaking keychain with an otter on it, and the otter was cute, Daddy. Okay, well, it's $6, so let's get a keychain with an otter on it. Whatever. I'm a little bit of a sucker sometimes when it comes to my child. But that's the numbers. Coming in at around $300 to $330. We had 3 days, 2 nights, road trip of a lifetime for her so far. In the future, they're only going to get better, because in the future, they're going to turn into week-long trips, and we're going to go to New Mexico and Utah and Nevada, but we're getting there. Not there yet, but we're getting there. So let's get into actual nerd trip, and let's start our way down to Louisiana first. And first, Poverty Point's going to be our first stop, and it is in Louisiana. It's not far from Vicksburg, actually. We ended up staying in Louisiana and just traveling over to Vicksburg. But Poverty Point's the first stop, and it's a 5.5-hour drive from Fort Smith, Arkansas. So we got up early. We left early. She was hyped, road trip day, so we were able to get up and start early. And we were able to be at Poverty Point by noon on the first day of the trip, which was Friday, like a week ago. And it's kind of interesting when you get past Little Rock. And now I'm from Arkansas. A lot of people that listen are, when you get past Little Rock and you start down towards the southeast corner of the state, you get into the cotton territory. You get into the real kind of South cotton plantation type of South, northwest Arkansas and western Arkansas, and even north central and northeast Arkansas. They're all different. They're mountains. It's a whole different terrain. We kind of have 2 major ecosystems, so to speak. We have the Delta, and then we got the mountains. And there's more than that, but there's no reason to bore you with all that tonight. But once you get down there, it gets really interesting because it gets super flat, and it is large fields everywhere. And we didn't see any cotton fields where we were. We saw a lot of cornfields that were all dead. And I never did ask. I wanted to ask and find out, why are all the cornfields dead? And then we saw a lot of soybean fields. But it's actually really kind of pretty. It's not like driving through Kansas where it's just literally flat, no trees, nothing but waving wheat-looking stuff as far as the eye can see for a billion hours. There's trees, there's rivers, there's oxbow lakes. You're getting down to the Mississippi River, guys. Like, it's really actually quite beautiful in its way. And there's a lot of interesting stuff along the way, too. Like, I found that we were very clearly traveling along an old railroad right-of-way, which is always fascinating to me. We've talked about that in many episodes. But what was really interesting is you could see many of the towns that we came on, the little settlements that were essentially ghost towns at this point. You could tell that the industry had dried up at some point, and it probably was cotton, who knows? But it was something in the South, and something had dried up. And all these towns dried up with it, and all was left was a few residents here and there. And it was really interesting because you could see, you would come into these areas, and there's these giant like grain silos and things, that where you store the produce of your field before you ship it out to market. And they're like these enormous abandoned structures. I mean, that's like an urbex, like dream come true. It's like a gold mine. It was super cool to see from a distance. Now, my child, I'm not going to crawl up a ladder 200 feet in the air with a 9-year-old. That would be incredibly irresponsible. But for any of you out there, don't break laws and trespass. But if you love that kind of photography, urbex photography, you could take that drive south from Little Rock down towards Poverty Point, Delhi, Louisiana, Vicksburg, Mississippi. There's a lot of really interesting abandoned infrastructure, be it railroad or the little grain hubs where those rails and rail yards would have carted all that stuff out to the rest of America. It's very, very interesting to see that kind of stuff, especially for a nerd like myself. And my daughter thought it was cool as heck too. Some of these complexes, these grain storage complexes, they weren't like these little silos I'm used to seeing out in western Oklahoma. These things were enormous, probably better than 8, 10 stories tall in some cases, and multiples of them. Sometimes it looked like dozens of them, just an enormous complex. It's really aesthetically quite interesting to see, and it's awesome for photography. Like, it would be a great trip for any of you shutterbugs out there. We got to Poverty Point right around noontime, and it was kind of cool. We were really just about the only people there. We ended up having the entire site to ourselves, essentially, for 2 or 3 hours. And the Rangers. And the Rangers were so exceptionally cool. And I'm going to shout them out by name. The two that I spent the most time with. One is the park manager, Mark Brink. He is a incredibly intelligent man. And if there's anyone that's the right guy for the job to manage a site of the importance and the scale of a Poverty Point, he's your guy. And then our particular guide that went along with us, he took us on the tram tour. It's a 6 mile tram tour, or you can hike it or you can drive it. But he took us on the tram tour and gave us the whole rundown. We got the docent guided tour. His name was John Zumwalt, and he was super cool. I'm actually friends with him on Facebook now. That was super cool. But we got to do some really awesome stuff. Poverty Point. What is Poverty Point, you might ask? Well, you know me. I'm a nerd. Indigenous history is kind of my thing. Poverty Point is a from 1700 to 1100 BCE. So we're talking 3,700 to 3,100 years before today. Was an enormous indigenous mound site. 5,000 people lived there regularly. It's estimated, sometimes up to 10,000 when it's time to party. But this site is it's fascinating. And you know what? I'm just going to read you some of this and let you get an idea of what's going on. Poverty Point was a ceremonial center that was once home to perhaps thousands of people, as well as a trading hub unmatched by any in North America at that time. Those who lived at Poverty Point left no written records, but they did leave millions of artifacts behind. The artifacts provide clues about how people here lived their lives from day to day. These ancient American Indians built Poverty Point and made and traded goods, but details as to who they were or what they believed are elusive. Incredibly, Poverty Point's inhabitants were not farmers. Only the natural bounty of some of the richest land and water in North America could feed such a large settlement of people living solely off of wild game and native plants. This makes the fact that Poverty Point became such an important trading center all the more astounding. Why is it astounding? Because archaeologists, anthropologists, all of us people that do these things forever have considered it basically prerequisite that you have to be an agricultural society and sedentary, essentially staying in place to be able to reach the level of organization required to get 5 or 10 or 15 or 20,000 people to all work on massive projects where you move 36,000 dump truck loads worth of dirt, or 3,600 dump truck loads worth of dirt, with nothing but wicker baskets, one basket at a time. And whoever, the ancient engineers that were lining these things up and creating perfect symmetries. Poverty Point is fascinating because it is essentially, it fronts a bayou, an old oxbow of the Mississippi River lake. And it has, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It has 6 concentric rings that at the time they were built would have been as high as 6 feet high between the swales in between them. They are perfectly symmetrical. They fan out from this bayou, and at the far end of it, on the back side of these concentric rings, is what at the time was a 100-foot tall mound with a platform. And now it's only 72 feet tall, but that actually comes from 3,600 years of erosion. And that's how they can estimate that it's 72 feet now. That's how they estimate that it was 100 then, is because they can actually measure the amount of cubic feet that has eroded from the top and went down and slid down the side of the mound. So they're able to actually almost specifically calculate how much dirt was lost off the top through erosion, and then figure out, well, that would have been about 30 feet higher. And so this would have been a 100-foot tall mound that actually has a shape that many have likened to a flying bird from the air. It's kind of the jury's out on whether it's really an effigy mound, which an effigy is simply a representation of a living thing, like, say, a bird. Jury's out on that. Most people are like, that's probably not likely, but it does kind of have that appearance. It is definitely symmetrical and quite beautiful when seen from the air. And there are many alignments with other mounds within this site that are perfect, symmetrical, straightaway alignments. It takes so much societal organization to pull off something like this. We couldn't. I'd bet you money if we got a bunch of us together today, it wouldn't look like that. It would look like Big Brother meets Survivor meets Mad Max, like, because we hate each other too much to do something like this as a society today. This is absolutely fascinating, and it's very, very cool to see. You can hike to the top of the main effigy or the main mound, which is 72 feet high. You can take the tour, you can walk the tour, you can even drive your own vehicle on the tour. They have a beautiful museum. It's a super, super cool museum that gives a lot of context to like the artifacts. You can see a lot of their material culture there. They had these thing called poverty point objects. And what they were is they figured out it was far more efficient to create these objects like essentially clay stones that you heat with the fire and then you cook with the stones because it cooks more evenly and for longer. And this is 3,600 years ago they figured this out, and they are specific to Poverty Point. If you find them anywhere in the world, anywhere in the United States, you know it came from Poverty Point because no one else was doing it. And that's a way to trace how big their trade network was. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating. Their sphere of influence was really big. And it's like, how? No one knows how. They were not sedentary farmers. There's no evidence of it. They were literally hunter-gatherers that were somehow making a living enough to coordinate enough to build this site. And anyway around it, it's a super awesome place to see, especially when you're coming in at $4 per person. And they have a junior ranger program, guys. For any of you with kids that love the junior ranger program, they have a junior ranger program. They have the badges. They've got a cool museum. They have got literally a globally significant remnant of mound builders in North America 2,000 years before the Mississippian period, which is what we know. When we think of mound builders in America, we think of the Midwest, the Ohio River. 2,000 years before they were doing this. And there are sites in Louisiana that are 2,000 years older than this. They don't have the intricate workings, but they're enormous mound sites that are 2,000 years older. The mound builder culture goes back so much further. And it was happening in Louisiana. And it's just kind of sleeping out there and nobody talks about it. But it is a World Heritage Site, $4 a person. Take your kids, get your badge, and like get in touch with history. And you know what? You might just get to do, like my daughter and I did. They broke out the atlatls for us. Do you know what an atlatl is? An atlatl is a stick with a little knob on it that basically makes an extension of your arm and works off of the principles of basic mechanics and creates a ton of leverage, and you can fling a spear that's freaking, 5 feet long. Some of them are longer. Essentially a spear. We call them darts, atlatl dart. You, once you get the technique down, can sling that thing, and some of the best in the world can sling that thing 200 freaking yards with killing power. Okay? We got to throw atlatls. And guess what? My daughter, in all of her gloriousness, slew the hay bale that they placed before us. On her third try, she managed to sling that atlatl dart. This is not easy to pick up. You know how many times I threw it? About 12 or 14. And do you know how many times I hit the hay bale? None. Not one. I got really close on one, and my form looked awesome in slow-mo because Maya was like, I'm videoing this in slow-mo, and it was super cool. And it looks like I hit the hay bale. So I put it on the interwebs because it's like, look at me. But just for you guys, just like inside info for you, those of you who watch the show, I didn't actually hit that hay bale. It just looks like it because the resolution's so bad that far from the camera. Anyway, atlatl dart throwing is hard. It is a whole mechanic that is unnatural. It's sort of like a baseball throw, but say if the baseball was at the end of a 3-foot long stick that you're holding on to. It's insane. She hit it on the third try, and it looked good. She looked like she knew what she was doing. And now every hay bale in western Arkansas is quivering in their boots, and they are going to kneel in fealty before her. So it was super, super cool. And she earned her junior ranger badge there, and we got our stamps because it's a national heritage or a national monument site. There's not stamps for being a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but there is for being a national monument. So we got our passport stamp. We got our Junior Ranger badge. We got to throw an atlatl dart for $4 a head. You can't beat that. With a stick, as my mom used to say. You can't beat that with an atlatl. Anyway, it was super fun. And from there, we headed on down to Delhi, which is not, when you see it, you may think Delhi, like New Delhi, right? Like India, Delhi. But no, I asked, and I suspected because we were in the South, and I'm from the South, I'm not bagging, that it would probably be pronounced Delhi, and I wasn't wrong. It is Delhi. And we stayed there at the Best Western, and it was a good stay. A good place to stay, to be central to Poverty Point and Vicksburg. And that was day one. We went back. We had pizza that night. We ordered it. We took it back to the room, and we swam in the pool because she is 9 and she loves swimming in the pool. And you know what, guys? It doesn't take a lot. I threw quarters over and over and over again for probably an hour and a half while she dove and tried to catch quarters as they flittered to the bottom of the pool. And she was quite entertained by it the entire time. It doesn't take much. I've often said, and there's actually even an ad campaign, I think, national ad campaign to this effect. It doesn't take a lot. You don't have to be a perfect parent. No one's perfect. What it takes is engagement. If you engage and you're there for your kid and you engage with them and you get off your GD phone. You know how many people I saw on our trip that were buried in their phones scrolling endlessly? I don't know what they were looking at. I'm not that nosy, but I know their kid was sitting there right by them staring at the floor like they were miserable while mom sat there putting on her pretty face for Instagram. Don't be that human. Engage with your kids, for your kids. Like, engage your kids. That's all they want. That's all they want. And we had a great time on day one. This definitely brings us to the end of the first half of the episode. I ran very long for the first half, but after our commercial break, we will come back and we will talk about Vicksburg. We will talk about the McRaven tour home, and we will talk about the Key City brewery and eatery for the pizza that we had there and our trip home. And that should take up the whole second half of the episode. So you guys stick around and we will be right back. What is up, all of you wayward souls? I want to tell you guys about our newest sponsor, Vendetti Optics, a brand based right here in the good old US of A, Portland, Oregon, to be exact. And I bought my first pair of Vendetti sunglasses about a year and a half ago and fell in love with them, so much so that I got online and ordered a couple of more pair. And when I did, there was a small shipping snafu, an order fulfillment snafu, and I got on the phone, gave them a call, and guess what? I get a call back from who? One of the big men themselves, right there in Portland, from the top of the chain. Have a great conversation, and we end up starting this great relationship we have. They more than made right the little snafu that occurred, and I am now a huge proponent of them because I can tell you from personal experience they are good people, and they're trying to compete with the big boys out there, coming in at a price point of about $40, but using the exact same frame material, TR90, and the same polarization process as the big guys. As it turns out, something I think we are already probably knew in our hearts, when you buy big name sunglasses, you're buying a big name, not necessarily any more quality than you can get somewhere else, like at Vendetti Optics. They have 29 different styles. They have multiple polarization options for whatever climate you happen to live in. And they back it up with like this lifetime guarantee that if your dog eats your sunglasses, it doesn't matter how you break them, send it back in with a check to cover shipping and handling, and you're golden. You got a new pair on the way. These guys are truly trying to do it right, and they have this philosophy that a really good pair of sunglasses should not cost you so much that you are afraid to wear them. And I think all of us outdoorsmen can relate to that. So if you guys, like me, are very practical and like to get more bang for your buck and wear some great looking sunglasses, check out VendettiOptics.com. That's BENDETTI optics.com, or you can go over to Instagram /Vendetti Optics. And that I highly suggest, whether you buy a pair or not, just to check out the cutest pupper you will ever see modeling sunglasses. Once again, that's VendettiOptics.com, and make sure and let them know Wayward Story sent you. And welcome back. Thank you guys for sticking around through our sponsor break. All right, so let's just get right back into it, and let's head over to Vicksburg. Vicksburg's a very cool little southern city right in Mississippi. Oh yeah, 3 states Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Add that to the trip by the numbers, 3 states, which 2 of those were new states to my daughter, which is super cool. She's racking up her frequent road trip miles these days. Vicksburg is a very interesting Civil War battlefield. And to be quite honest, I did not know a lot about it, to my shame or whatever, because I'm supposed to be all history, whatever. But listen, there's a whole lot of history. You can only specialize in a few things, and Civil War is not one of my specialties. Now, the Civil War in the Trans-Mississippi is becoming that pretty quickly. But the Civil War west of the Mississippi, where it was the big battles and stuff, it's just like not so much my thing. So I didn't really know. This battle is actually really kind of mind-numbing. This thing is huge. This thing was huge. And so I'm going to kind of give it to you by the numbers, but you know what? I better first take us play by play. And the first thing is when you come from, say, Delhi, from Louisiana on that interstate into Mississippi, and you cross the Mississippi River, also the first time my daughter's ever seen the Mississippi River, which was super awesome because you get that far south, there's no more dams impeding things, and it is an enormous river. And so that was super cool for her to see a bridge that big and a river that wide. And as soon as you cross the river, there's the Mississippi Welcome Center. And at that, literally out of the same parking lot, you can walk up to what is Navy Circle, which is one of the southernmost earthworks of the siege of Vicksburg, the Battle of Vicksburg. And you can go up on that earthwork and you get a freaking commanding view of both of the train bridge and the interstate bridge that cross the river. And it is a beautiful sight to see. It's absolutely stunning. The size, the scale, it's stunning. It's an enormous scale. And for someone like a 9-year-old, turning into a 10-year-old, for those little eyes and that little mind that is growing so exponentially, so quickly, big, enormous sights like that really gets into your soul. And she hung on that little fence there and just looked over at it. And I don't know exactly what she was thinking, but I know what I would have been at her age. And I suspect it's very similar because she's a very similar soul to me. And I really hope it is that, because that would have just been something that really, really impresses you and sticks with you. It's a cool sight, even as a grown-up. So when you travel over, make sure and stop at the Mississippi River or the Mississippi Welcome Center right there across the river and climb up onto Navy Circle, into those earthworks, and get a good view and get some good pictures. Those are actually on my Facebook. I guess I should put them on my Instagram, WaywardSon119. And you can go check those out and get a pretty good view. There's a pretty cool picture where you can see her down there below me hanging on that fence and looking out over the river. And it's like one of my favorite pictures ever. But from there, you have to travel a few miles onto the actual national military park, to the National Parks Administered National Military Park. It's big, y'all. They have a 16-mile driving tour of the battlefield. This is an enormous battlefield. Why is that? Because the whole city at the time was the battlefield. A siege was laid by the Union forces onto the city of Vicksburg. They literally surrounded it and starved them out. I mean, they fought, they made some offensives, lots of men died, lots of casualties, but they finally just decided, we're just going to sit on this and we're going to starve them out. If we can cut off river traffic, if we can cut off their supply lines and the railroad supply lines, we can take them out. And that's exactly what happened. So the interesting things, I'm going to hit kind of the high points of the Battle of Vicksburg here. And this is straight from the National Parks brochure on the site. And it starts out with, the nation was divided, but both sides agreed Vicksburg was vital to victory. President Jefferson Davis, of the Confederacy, of course, knew how important this town overlooking a Mississippi River bend was to the Confederacy. To him, Vicksburg, Mississippi was the nailhead that holds the South's two halves together. At the start of the Civil War, Confederates controlled the Mississippi River south of Cairo, Illinois, which to us it looks like Cairo, but I found out it is Cairo. Just work with me, or Cairo, Illinois. They fortified strategic river points like Vicksburg with its riverfront artillery batteries and a ring of forts whose 172 guns guarded all land approaches. 172 guns guarded all land approaches. They leveraged the natural maze of swamps and bayous for defense, and they used these routes for supplies and troops. Vicksburg was the South's lifeline. Essentially, this is how the South, the Confederacy, the Southern cause, was getting any materials at all it was able to garner. Because one thing a lot of people don't recognize about the Civil War, and really what was the big Achilles heel in the downfall of the South, is they had no principal resources. Like, they had cotton. It was a slave society. They were built on slave labor agriculture. They did not have production at any scale. The North did. That's where the Industrial Revolution was. So the North could keep pumping out cannons and guns and small arms and ammunition and gunpowder. The South had to buy it from people, from European allies that wanted to see the South succeed. And if you could, that's where the Navy comes from in the Civil War. There were many Civil War naval battles, something else a lot of people are unfamiliar with. The reason for that is because the South had to be cut off. The entire South has got a coastline, right? You've got to keep their allies from getting them goods. And if you can keep their allies from getting them goods, then you can essentially starve out the entire Confederacy. And when I say starve out, not necessarily starve out, but you can outgun them. It's the same reason the U.S. won World War II against Japan in the Pacific Theater. More than anything is because we were literally outproducing them 10 planes to 1. Every piece of equipment they could put out, we could put out 10 more in the same time frame. And we essentially beat them in a war of attrition because they would have fought to the very bloody end, and they really did. This is a similar idea. The North outpaced the South in production, and that's what ultimately, in the end, ground the South down. It was one of the things, ultimately. There's many historians out there that would be like, actually, and you wouldn't be wrong. There's always multiple factors. It's never simple in black and white, right? But that's one of the big factors that played into that. So, Vicksburg could also be the North's lifeline, picking back up in the brochure here. The U.S. Army could pass troops and supplies into the South by road, river, or rail, essentially acting as a back door to infiltrate the South. They could isolate Texas, Arkansas, and most of Louisiana, which would cut off the Confederate supplies and recruits. As the war progressed, federal, naval, and military forces gained control of more of the Mississippi River, fighting south from Illinois and north from the Gulf as they closed in on Vicksburg. President Abraham Lincoln knew Vicksburg was the key. The war can never be brought to a close until that key is in our pocket. He knew how valuable this town on a high bluff was to the United States. The Federals captured post after post, and then they set their sights on Vicksburg. This battle was a big deal. It's a whole town entrenched with earthworks that are mind-blowing. When you go see these earthworks, they will trip you out. They're huge. When I say monumental, it's amazing to think those guys built those earthworks. And of course, they did work with the natural terrain and topography in places, but some of this stuff is enormous on a scale that you cannot comprehend someone building essentially with just an army of laborers. They didn't exactly have bulldozers and track hoes. There was some industry. They had some things. They had mules. They had wagons. They had things of that nature, but not much more than shovels and manpower and mule power, horsepower. It's truly mind-boggling. But they entrenched around, the Confederates did this entire city, 33,000 of them. The Union brought 77,000 men to bear on Vicksburg for a grand total of 110,000 engaged troops. That is an enormous number of people. That is an enormous battlefield. And this battle went on for 47 days. Because it was a siege. There were some initial attempts to take the field, and there was other stuff I'm not going to bore you with, those of you who don't care about history and just want to go get your park stamp and see some kind of cool stuff. But this was a big dang deal. This is an enormous battlefield that's even bigger than the National Battlefield Preserves in its 17-mile driving tour. But it is so big, in fact, for the 16-mile driving tour, there are over 1,400 monuments inside the park boundaries for the various groups, all the different states that participated, all the northern states. There's monuments for Ohio and Illinois and you name it, they're there. For the South, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, you name it. Everyone was represented there. It was a big crazy battle. And to that end, some numbers you should know about the battle to put it into context is the casualties from the Vicksburg campaign. The total number of casualties comes to, let me see here, roughly 19,200. The Union had over 1,581 men killed. The Confederates had over 1,400 men killed. Wounded is what pushes you up into, the stratosphere where you get up to like 19,000. Missing, the Confederates had over 3,800 missing soldiers from this 47-day siege. There's an enormous number of Civil War soldiers interred in the National Cemetery, which is greater than the number that actually died in the battle, because people would be reinterred from other battlefields in the years that would follow the war. But essentially, it contains the remains of over 17,000 Union soldiers and veterans, of whom almost 13,000 are unknown. That is a sobering number to think about, 13,000 unknown men who never went home to their families, and their families never found out exactly where or how they died even. That's a sobering number. During the siege, the Confederates buried their dead in the city cemetery, and that is now called Soldiers' Rest, and it contains the remains of over 5,000 soldiers. It's pretty mind-boggling, this entrenchment, but it's something that I think you should all see. And if you're taking this road trip because you like history, guys, listen, you could be there for several days, and I'm not joking. You could spend 2 to 3 to 4 days, at least. If you're not very interested, but you are interested enough in just American history, the Civil War passingly, you still need to allot like a half-day minimum, and most of a whole day if you want to drive the 16-mile tour and stop at some of the most impressive earthworks and monuments. My daughter, who is not just enormously into the Civil War, she loves the museum parts, but she's not an enormous like Civil War freak. Even with that said, us doing the Junior Ranger book and touring both museums on site, we're going to get to, there's a second one that's far inside the battlefield, and you're going to dig that place. We're going to get to it. We got there at 8:30 a.m., and we left at almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We were engaged the whole time. It is an enormous living memorial in a way, this preserved battlefield. It's enormous. And there's so much to do there. Number one, the Junior Ranger book, which you only have to do 5 pages, but my child is a little bit obsessive, kind of like her daddy is, and she wants to do every single page. And so we do every single page, and usually she gets a bonus award. They usually give her like an extra pins, like, dang, you only needed to do 5 and you did 15 pages. And they'll like have something else that they'll tack on. And don't hold us to that. Don't go to national parks and say, we did every page. Where's the rest of our swag? That's just something that happens more often than not, I think, because they're like, wow, this is impressive. What else can I give this prodigy here? But they have a really cool Junior Ranger program, which we did. We drove the 16-mile tour. We stopped several times to take pictures. One of the probably most impressive memorials on site is the Illinois Memorial. 36,000 soldiers from Illinois served in this campaign. 36,000. That's like almost half the Union Army that was there. That's a mind-blowing number for a single state to have men there. Well, this Illinois Memorial is a rotunda. It's a very Roman-inspired rotunda. It's got the open hole at the top like some of the Roman, I forget which palace it was, which Roman emperor had it. But the sun shines through the hole, and at different times of year, the light actually shines on different parts of the inside of the rotunda as it moves around. And it has this resonance to it. Like if you're in there, like when my child and I were talking, we couldn't even hardly hear each other talk if we were standing more than 5 feet away, because the echoes, the reverberations are so loud. And so when we were in there, we ended up in there, just she and I, for a few minutes. And I wanted to try out the resonance. Understand that I have no misconceptions about my singing voice. I do not sing publicly. Normally, I don't like to sing. I'm not a great singer. But I wanted to test it. And I was like, all right, girl, I need you to not be embarrassed by your father for 2 seconds. There's no one here. I'm about to sing because I want to hear this. I didn't want to do Amazing Grace because that's just way, way, way too cliche for me for that kind of a setting, even though I guess it would be appropriate. But I was like, I have to do something a little different. The only thing I could think of was Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. And so I belted out just the first line. And I didn't even do it that loud. And that resonance, when I finished the last word, went on for, I would say, 4 to 6 seconds-ish. I was like, oh my gosh. So I tried the next line. And the next line goes up an octave and hits this note. And when I hit that note, the resonance harmonized with itself. My echo harmonized with me, and I've never experienced that in my life, and it literally made the hair stand up on my arms all the way up my neck. It gave me chills from head to toe. There's something about the power of that idea. Like, this is architecture throughout history. This is something that's always been fascinating. Like, you think about the Roman Colosseum, and it's enormous, and it's meant to impress, and it's meant to inspire awe. Lots of cathedrals, Gothic cathedrals in Europe and stuff, they were literally designed to create almost spiritual seeming experiences within the viewer, within the experiencer. And this little rotunda, I got to see it for myself firsthand, because this was Roman inspired. And it functions exactly as it should. This is a memorial to 36,000 men that fought in a bloody 47-day siege on a battlefield that I am standing on right now. And I come in here and I throw out some old spiritual hymn just because that's what it seemed right to do at the moment. And it literally affected me internally. I mean, it literally gave me goosebumps. It was insane. And if you want real bad to see it, you can actually hunt me down on Facebook. That's the only place I posted it. And you can listen to that and understand that I make no pretenses about my singing voice, but it's because the echo, the resonance, it's just chilling to me. And so I've left it there for anyone that might want to go and see and hear it for themselves. You need to go into that rotunda yourself. You need to make this trip. Now, I mentioned there's more there. There's a whole nother museum within the park boundaries that is not the entrance museum, the Park Visitor Center. What is that museum? That is the USS Cairo. They call it the Cairo. It is spelled Cairo, like Cairo, Egypt. Like I always said Cairo, Illinois, and I said earlier Cairo, Illinois. It probably is Cairo, Illinois. Anyway, around it, the boat itself, everyone there pronounces it the Cairo, so I'm pronouncing it the Cairo, and I don't really care which way it is, so don't send me emails. I don't need to hear about it. This is a very cool museum because what is the Cairo? The Cairo was an ironclad gunboat that was sent to Vicksburg to help run those blockades on the river, to help encircle the city to fight this battle. And it took a couple of torpedoes, which was a new technology at the time. And they were not torpedoes as we think of torpedoes. What they were was mines. They were probably electrically detonated mines, from what we understand. And anyway, it sank to the bottom of the Mississippi River, and it sat there until the 1960s, when one Edward Barrs, or Bars, I don't know how to pronounce it, B-E-A-R-R, or B-E-A-R-S-S. He was like the historian, the head historian for the National Park Service back in the day. He had a huge role here at Fort Smith, as a matter of fact. He got curious, and he found a novel way, and he thought, you know what, I bet I can find that thing, and they did. They found it at the bottom of the Mississippi River, and they managed to raise it, mostly, and now it is preserved and on display at the USS Cairo Museum, or the is it USS? Let me check real quick. I don't remember. I don't know naval history, so that's not my thing. Yep, the USS. And you know what? Let me just read it to you. An explosive discovery. December 12th, 1862. The gunboat USS Cairo, one of the United States' first ironclad warships, steams up the Yazoo River north of Vicksburg. Cairo is on a mission to destroy Confederate batteries and clear enemy obstructions from the channel. Suddenly, two quick explosions tear holes in the Cairo. In minutes it sinks. Only the tops of its smokestacks and flagstaff show above the waters, but amazingly no crew were hurt. Cairo was the first vessel sunk by an electronically detonated torpedo/mine. Silt, sand, and mud covered the ship until its 1956 discovery. Like a time capsule, Cairo preserved information on naval construction, naval stores, armament, and the crew's personal gear. Today, the artifacts recovered from the Cairo before and after its salvage in the 1960s and the boat's remains are exhibited at the USS Cairo Museum. These artifacts and the gunboat give many insights into the Civil War naval life. the USS Caro and his commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Thomas O. Selfridge, which they told me all about this guy and how he had been at the helm of 2 other boats that sank before this one, and maybe he wasn't the best guy to be at the helm, but that's something you only get to hear about if you go to the park and you find out for yourself, okay? And also, I guess I should post the pictures of the Caro on my Instagram as well, probably before I drop this episode. That would be a good idea. There's a lot of information here, and I'm not going to bore you with all of it. What you need to know is it's an awesome national park site. You can get your junior ranger badges if you're into that and you want to. It's a cool tour. There are incredibly picturesque monuments everywhere, enormous earthworks. It's a place for the shutterbugs, man. And it's a super cool place. And Vicksburg itself is a really cool town. That's how we wrapped out this day as we go on to the McRaven tour home. But we had a couple of hours to kill, and it was dinner time. So I asked everyone at the visitor center at Vicksburg, at the National Parks Visitor Center, of which actually I did want to shout out. All the crew there was awesome. There were several volunteers, just like myself, volunteer docents and park staff, and there was also the ranger. And I did not get his name, and that's my bad. And man, if you ever listen to this, please forgive me. But he knew my guy here at Fort Smith because of the historic weapons training program. And so they were really cool to us. And I asked all of them, where should we eat? And they all said, to the person, Key City Brewery and Eatery. They make awesome pizza. It's right kind of in downtown, close to the river in Vicksburg. And it was super cool, guys. Vicksburg downtown is a very cool, neat little scene. Lots of cool people wandering around. It's very neat. There's even a museum down there for like a very old historic railroad depot museum, but it was closed when we were there. We didn't get to go, and that's fine. But something for any of you that may take the trip in the future, something you may check out. But definitely check out Key City Brewery and Eatery. As you all know, I've said many times, I haven't drank. I quit keeping track of those years sober or whatever, but it's been like over 15 years now, I think. I don't drink, but they made great sweet tea, as you should expect in the South. And they made really, really good pizza, like really, really, really good pizza. And it was super affordable for a fancy place like that. It was a very neat environment. It's a very modern kind of eatery that you expect to find in any city. This is what I run into everywhere. Everywhere I travel, you run into things that have the same kind of thematics. They're not chains, but they're all kind of following the same thematic. They're trying to be modern, and they're doing a good job of it, and they're making really good food. It's not crap that's coming off the Cisco or the Ben Keith truck like everywhere in Arkansas is. It's real food, and the pizza was absolutely awesome. My daughter loved it, and she's very picky about her pizza, and that also ended up being lunch the next day. But that pizza was literally like $18 for a large pizza. That's totally reasonable for pizza. You know, that is totally reasonable for a large pizza. In my world, at least. And so that was a really big win. We got to go to a neat little place in a historic building in historic downtown Vicksburg with a really cool scene, a super cool ambience, as it were, and have some great pizza. And then we got to have it for lunch the next day too. So that was like a big win on the financial aspect of things, on the price of the trip. That was a big win, but also it was a great addition to exploring the culture of the area that we had come to. And understand, you're in Vicksburg, Mississippi. You are in the deep South. Now, is it Alabama? No, but it's still Mississippi's Mississippi. It's the South, y'all. You're in the deep South. It is a different culture. It is a different world. It is different sensibilities. And that's part of why you travel, isn't it? I grew up in the South, but in kind of the weird upper Midwest, lower South, like a state that was torn even during the Civil War in Arkansas, Oklahoma, the Indian Territory. The further south you go, the more it becomes that actual Southern culture, and it's something you should go experience. And Vicksburg's really a pretty good place to do it. It's a very neat place. So after we've killed our time there and we've gotten our little cultural local flavor, some local pizza and some local vibes downtown, which was super cool. She enjoyed that as well. We went to the McRaven tour home. This is fun. You know, my child is really getting into these haunted ghost tours. I like the history aspect and the ghosty stuff too. I super love it. But the McRaven home tour, the McRaven home is a super, super historic home in its own right. Let me see. Here we go. The time capsule of the South, according to National Geographic magazine. And they earned that title by the fact that it was built in 3 different architectural periods. The frontier period of 1797 was the first piece of the house that was built portion. Then the Empire architectural style of 1836, and then the Greek Revival style in 1849. This house was constructed in 3 phases by 3 different families before the Civil War even started. It started in 1797, so that alone, a 226-year-old house. I wrote it down somewhere here. Let me see. Yeah, it's like a 226-year-old house. That's crazy. The history of it is really cool, and it has got ties to, and I know you've all heard of French's Mustard. Okay, one of the owners, I think the most recent owner before the current owners, was a guy that was like an heir to like the French's Mustard fortune. I forget how he was a part of that family. They're super fascinating stories. I'm going to tell you this. I'm just going to tease you with this. I'm not going to tell all their stories. They might get mad at me, but I will tease you with this. That man was super into history. He was not into ghosts. He lived there for several years. He sank millions of dollars into collections of historic stuff to put in that house. And then something happened in that house one night, and he walked out the door and left over $4 million of things in that house, and he relocated that night. He will not come back. He will not make contact. He sold it off. However he sold it off, left it all. Won't even talk about what happened there. They have their story of what happened there. How accurate that is, you have to assess for yourself. But what we do know for a fact is that man left a literal fortune in essentially museum quality artifacts behind, a literal fortune, over $4 million worth. In the middle of the night, he walked out in the middle of the night and never came back, left everything, all of his belongings, everything. That's very interesting detail. The house itself, totally worth checking out, guys. Like, it has been on apparently A&E, the Travel Channel, 48 Hours, something called Look Around Mississippi with Walt Grayson. Boy, that's a name. If that's not a freaking newscaster name, Walt Grayson. It's really, really, really beautiful house, but it's also fascinating, man. The back portion that was built in 1797, and that's probably just the way the plaster is and the bricks are and the way it was made. But when you're inside that room, it is creepy. But what we did is we paid like a combined price for a historic tour and the ghost tour. They're 2 different things. One of them is a lot more theatrical. The other is a lot more factual. And the second one might even be factual, but it's very theatrical. And I suggest you do them both together. And you have to go to one during the day and one at night, because they don't just like concurrently run into each other. So we did ours like the last tour of the day for the history. And then we had to go. That's actually what we did, is we went and had our dinner then. And then we had to come back at 7 o'clock to start our tour. And then they have tours that start at 8:30. And for any of you that also are into ghosty ghost and like ghost hunting, you can also actually catch, like every so often, they have actual ghost hunts that run from the late, like, tour at 8:30 well into the night as they try to hunt these things down. Highly entertaining, no matter what you believe. Very entertaining. Enormous amount of history. They touch on Vicksburg history. They touch on a whole lot of things. You learn a lot about the inhabitants that were there during the siege of Vicksburg. If you're very much into history, it's a must stop. If you're very much into spooky spooks, absolutely a must stop. My daughter loved it. This trip, time of her life, man, like she loved it, and it makes my soul happy that that's how it played out. But the McRaven tour home in Vicksburg, that's a great long weekend, guys. Poverty Point, Vicksburg National Battlefield, McRaven home, Key City Brewery, and then we even got a little bit of adventuring in on the way home, and we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to wrap up this episode because we're there. On the way home, 5.5 hour drive, but we're driving through a part of Arkansas that no one ever goes to. We're never going to go to again, hardly ever. I'm going to have to go there some long weekend purposely for myself just to get all my state park stamps there. And there's some cool state parks there. Arkansas Post, like the first settlement in southeast Arkansas in the territory that would become Arkansas, French Post settlement. The Louisiana Purchase State Park is down. There's a lot of things down there to check out. Actually, I think it's a national monument, the Louisiana Purchase Monument. That's going to have to happen someday. But we happen to be driving directly by a place called Lake Chico State Park. It looks like Chicot or Chicot or whatever, but I asked them, it's Lake Chico State Park. And what it is like, you know what, let me just read the little things for you, because this was just a neat little run by to grab a stamp and actually see an awesome oxbow, swamp, bayou, cypress tree, alligator filled type of swamp thing as you were driving by. Lake Chico State Park, situated in a grove of majestic wild pecans and ringed with cypress trees standing literally up to their knees in water along the nation's largest natural oxbow remnant, a cutoff of the mighty Mississippi, is Lake Chico State Park. True Delta country can be found in this corner of southeast Arkansas, complete with all the romance inherent in the lands that sweep down Old Man River. Arkansas State Park, they have all the amenities. They have camping spots. They have, the visitor center where you can buy ice and things. And it's just a really cool lake. It's a super cool environment. This is for the bird watchers. This is for the people who like to do nature and wildlife photography. Gorgeous place. Gorgeous lake. It actually, my daughter and I both had the same reaction, which was as we were driving through the little town that's close to it. I think it was called Lake Village. I believe it was called Lake Village. Yes, as we were driving through that along the Oxbow, going around to the state park, we both were like, this place just feels really inviting. This just feels like a really comfortable, inviting place. I would like to stay here. We both had that same reaction. There's something about it very comforting, very picturesque. It's really beautiful. It's somewhere to check out, somewhere to stop off, somewhere to go get your state park stamp. And so I just wanted to throw it in because it was one of the state parks we saw of the two. It was on our return trip home, and that child was still ready to adventure. So we made this little sidetrack adventure on the way home. And one other place that you may want to check out, and I just want you to know exists. We didn't have time to stop, and we were like, it just ran on too long. But it's the Rauher Heritage Site Museum. The folks at Lake Chico said they call it Rower. What it is, there's a museum in this little town that I do not remember now, but there's also the actual site that you can go visit out in the countryside. And what it is was the Rower Japanese American Relocation Center. And this is from that ugly little period in America where we actually had concentration camps for Japanese. In 1942, following the attack on Pearl Harbor, the federal government forced Japanese American citizens to leave the West Coast, supposedly for reasons of national security. They left homes, businesses, and communities and were imprisoned in camps such as this one at Rower. Anyway, they were legitimate concentration camps. And we had at least this one in Arkansas. I don't know if there were two, but I know this one was. And we didn't get to go to it. We wanted to. It didn't work out. It was a little bit too far off our path. But I want you guys to know about it. And I also wanted to point out, for any of you that were unawares, we absolutely interred Japanese American citizens who had done nothing wrong in concentration camps in the United States of America in the 20th century. Like, we got to get off our high horse about a lot of stuff, don't we? You just need to know about that. Look it up if you're very interested. Anyway, guys, that brings us to the end of tonight's show. That was a blast that weekend. Had so much fun. I can't wait to take another one. I don't know. I'm going to have to knock off a bank or a liquor store maybe. Like, there just isn't enough money to actually go do all the things that we would love to do. But it was such a blast. She had such a good time. I hope that it really opened up some of her horizons. Getting to throw a atlatl. Dude, that girl was on top of the world. She nailed that hay bale third try, and she got a standing ovation from the park ranger. We just lost it. It was so cool. It was an awesome trip, and it's one for all of you. If you ever make it into the further deep south, something for you to consider. Poverty Point, I cannot recommend enough. Vicksburg National Battlefield, the same thing. It's a great tour. So Nerdfest 24. Nerd Trip 24 was absolutely a win. Vicksburg is a really cool city to visit, and there is a lot in the general region that would keep you busy for a while, no matter what you're interested in. So I highly suggest any of you go and check it out for yourselves. And that is going to wrap up tonight's show. Thank you all for coming back and waiting so patiently for so long for me to be able to get back behind this mic and drop you an episode. You are all greatly appreciated. If you want to know more about anything we do, waywardstories.com. If you want to see pictures of anything I'm out there doing, Instagram.com/waywardson119. And if you want to get in touch, if you want to tell me stories about your adventures, if you want me to tell some of your adventures on this show, get in touch at mywaywardstory@gmail.com. Until we meet again, and we talk about something that I have no idea what it'll be, probably, hopefully, less than a month from now, but it won't be. I can tell you that. Life's just what it is right now. But I'll be back with you as soon as I can get with you. As they say, hold please. But just know, I love making this show for you guys, and I will do it every chance I get the chance as soon as I can. Until we meet again, you guys, get out there. Go explore some haunted tour homes. Go explore some battlefields. Go find you a wonderful waterfall. Go find you something out there that ignites your soul. Get out there and do it. And until then, you guys remember to be good to each other.